Hey there, YouTube. Before I get into the video, let me remind you that if you like my content, hit that like and subscribe button. Also, if you feel the need to support me, hit me up on my Patreon at patreon.com/uncommonramen. Capital U, capital R. I do all of this in my free time, so any amount of support can help me bring more of this content to you more often. Okay, today we are going to look at Darien, King of Kjeldor. I'm told that this is an OG strat, but it looks like a lot of fun, so we're going to explore that. Let's just jump in. Darien, King of Kjeldor is 4 and 2 white for a 3/3 whenever you're dealt damage. You may put that many 1/1 white soldier creature tokens into play. So we're going to take a lot of damage. At least that's the idea. We're going to take a look at creatures. Okay, we have Anointer Priest for 1 and a white. This is a 1/3. Whenever a creature token enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. It has Embalm, 3 and a white. Auriok Champion for 2 white. This is a 1/1 with protection from black and red. Whenever another creature comes into play, you may gain 1 life. Captain of the Watch, 4 and 2 white for a 3/3 with vigilance. Other soldier creatures you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance. When Captain of the Watch enters the battlefield, put 3 1/1 white soldier tokens onto the battlefield. Catapult Master for 3 and 2 white. This is a 3/3. You tap 5 untapped soldiers you control to remove target creature from the game. Coppercoat Vanguard for 1 and a white. This is a 2/2. Each other human you control gets +1/+0 and has Ward 1. Daru Warchief. This is 2 and 2 white for a 1/1. Soldier spells you play cost 1 less to play. Soldiers get +1/+2. Soldiers you control. Daxos, Blessed by the Sun. This is 2 white for a 2-star. Daxos' toughness is equal to your devotion to white. Whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield or dies, you gain 1 life. Defiler of Faith for 3 and 2 white. This is a 5/5 with vigilance. As an additional cost to cast white permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost 1 white less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of white mana you pay. When you cast a white permanent, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Field Marshal for 1 and 2 white. This is a 2/2. Other soldier creatures you get +1/+1 and have first strike. Healer of the Pride for 3 and a white. This is a 2/3. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 2 life. Impassioned Orator for 1 and a white. This is a 2/2. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Keeper of the Accord for 3 and a white. This is a 3/4. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more creatures than you, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more lands than you, you may search your library for a basic plains card, put it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. Knight of the White Orchid for 2 white. This is a 2/2 with first strike. Whenever Knight of the White Orchid enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you may search your library for a plains card, put that onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Knight Captain of Eos. 4 and a white for a 2/2. When Knight Captain of Eos comes into play, put 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens into play, and for 1 white you can sacrifice a soldier to prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Linden, the Steadfast Queen for 3 white. This is a 3/3 with vigilance. Whenever a white creature you control attacks, you gain 1 life. Lunarch Veteran for 1 white. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. It has Disturb for 1 and a white. We'll take a look at the back side of that. We have Luminous Phantom, flying, 1/1. Whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, you gain 1 life. If Luminous Phantom would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. Mentor of the Meek for 2 and a white. This is a 2/2. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card. Mirror Entity for 2 and a white. This is a 1/1 with Changeling. You can pay X, and until end of turn, creatures you control have base power and toughness XX and gain all creature types. Myrel, Shield of Argive. This is 3 and a white for a 3/4. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. Whenever Myrel, Shield of Argive attacks, create X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. Audric, Master Tactician for 2 and 2 white. This is a 3/4 with first strike. Whenever Audric, Master Tactician, and at least 3 other creatures attack, you choose which creatures block this combat and how those creatures block. Odritac, Deepest Foundation for 4 and 2 white. This is a 6/6 with Vigilance. If 1 or more creature tokens would be created under your control, 3 times that many of those tokens are created instead. When Odritac dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control. And we'll take a look at the other side of that. Temple of Civilization. You can tap this for white, or you can pay 2 and a white and tap this to transform Temple of Civilization. Activate only if you attacked with 3 or more creatures this turn, and only as a sorcery. Soul Warden for 1 white. This is a 1/1. When any other creature comes into play, gain a life. Soul's Attendant for 1 white. This is a 1/1. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you may gain 1 life. Suture Priest for 1 and a white. This is a 1/1. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain 1 life. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you may have that player lose 1 life. Weathered Wayfarer for 1 white. This is a 1/1. You may pay 1 white and tap this to search your library for a land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Activate only if an opponent controls more lands than you. And finally, we have Welcoming Vampire for 2 and a white. This is a 2/3 with flying. Whenever 1 or more other creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Okay, next up is going to be Instants. I'm going to start with Akroma's Will. For 3 and a white, choose 1. If you control a commander, as you cast this spell, you may choose both. Creatures you control gain Flying, Vigilance, Double Strike until end of turn. Or creatures you control gain Lifelink, Indestructible, and Protection from all colors until end of turn. Blood of the Martyr for 3 white. For the remainder of the turn, you may redirect damage done to any number of creatures to yourself instead. Brave the Elements for 1 white. Choose a color. White creatures you control gain protection from the chosen color until end of turn. Flawless Maneuver for 2 and a white. If you control your commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. Creatures you control gain Indestructible until end of turn. Generous Gift for 2 and a white. Destroy target permanent. Its controller gets a 3/3 green elephant creature token. Path to Exile for 1 white. Exile target creature. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put that onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Return to Dust for 2 and 2 white. Exile target artifact or enchantment. If you cast this spell during your main phase, you may exile up to 1 other target artifact or enchantment. Swords to Plowshares for 1 white. Exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. And finally, Unbreakable Formation for 2 and a white. Creatures you control gain Indestructible until end of turn. It has Addendum. If you cast the spell during your main phase, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature, or each of those creatures, and they gain Vigilance until end of turn. Alright, next up we are going to take a look at Sorceries. Starting with Austere Command. 4 and 2 white, choose 2, destroy all artifacts, or destroy all enchantments, or destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less, or destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 4 or greater. Farewell for 4 and 2 white. Choose one or more. Exile all artifacts, exile all creatures, exile all enchantments, or exile all graveyards. Hour of Reckoning for 4 and 3 white. It has Convoke. Destroy all non-token creatures. Martial Coup for X and 2 white. Create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. If X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. Mass Calcify for 5 and 2 white. Destroy all non-white creatures. Okay, next up is artifacts. Angel's Trumpet for 3. Attacking does not cause creatures to tap, and at the end of each player's turn, tap all untapped creatures he or she controls that did not attack this turn. Angel's Trumpet deals 1 damage to that player for each creature tapped this way. Ankh of Mishra for 2. Ankh does 2 damage to anyone who puts a new land into play. Arcane Signet for 2. You can tap this to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Archaeomancer's Map for 2 and a white. When Archaeomancer's Map enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 2 basic planes. Reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. When a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player controls more lands than you, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Blasting Station for 3. You can tap this and sacrifice a creature to have Blasting Station deal 1 damage to target creature or player. When a creature comes into play, you may untap Blasting Station. Heraldic Banner for 3. As Heraldic Banner enters the battlefield, choose a color. Creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+0. You can tap this to add mana of the chosen color. 1 mana of the chosen color. Horn of Gondor for 3. When Horn of Gondor enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. And for 3, you can tap this to create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of humans you control. Jade Monolith for 4. You can pay 1. You may take damage done to any creature on yourself instead, but you must take all of it. Source of damage is unchanged. These are badly written back then. Jinxed Idol for 2. At the beginning of your upkeep, Jinxed Idol deals 2 damage to you. You can sacrifice a creature and target opponent gains control of Jinxed Idol. Lightning Greaves costs 2. Equipped creature has haste and shroud, and it equips for 0. Mind Stone, it costs 2. You can tap it for colorless, or you can pay 1 and tap it and sacrifice it to draw a card. Pearl Medallion costs 2. White spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Skull Clamp costs 1. Equipped creature gets +1/-1. When equipped creature is put into a graveyard, draw 2 cards, and it equips for 1. Soul Ring costs 1. You can tap it for 2 colorless. And Swiftfoot Boots costs 2. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste, and it equips for 1. Next up is Enchantments. A Johnny's Welcome for 1 white. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Anointed Procession for 3 and a white. Whenever you would create a token, you create twice that many tokens instead. Cathar's Crusade for 3 and 2 white. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Divine Visitation for 3 and 2 white. If 1 or more creature tokens would be created under your control, that many 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance are created instead. Intangible Virtue for 1 and a white. Creature tokens you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance. Mobilization for 2 and a white. Soldier creatures have vigilance. And for 2 and a white, you can put a 1/1 white soldier creature token onto the battlefield. On Thin Ice for 1 white. Enchant Snowland you control. When On Thin Ice enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until On Thin Ice leaves the battlefield. Smothering Tithe for 3 and a white. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you create a treasure token. Tokasia's Welcome. For 2 and a white, when 1 or more creatures with mana value 3 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Next up we have Planeswalkers. Elspeth Sun's Champion. For 4 and 2 white, this has 4 loyalty on ETB. You can +1 to create 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. You can -3 to destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. And you can -7 to get an emblem. With creatures you control, get +2/+2 and have flying. Okay, next up is non-basic lands. Starting with Ancient Tomb, you can tap this to add 2 colorless to your mana pool. Ancient Tomb deals 2 damage to you. City of Brass, you can tap this to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. City of Brass deals 1 damage to you. Emeria, the Sky Ruin, enters the battlefield tapped. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 7 or more planes, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can also tap this for white. Grand Colosseum enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap this for colorless, or you can tap this to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Grand Colosseum deals 1 damage to you. Minas Tirith enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. Taps for white. You can also pay 1 and a white and tap this to draw a card, but you can only activate that if you have attacked with 2 or more creatures this turn. Myriad Landscape enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap this for colorless. You can also pay 2 and tap this and sacrifice this to search your library for up to 2 basic land types that share a land type. 2 basic land cards that share a land type, and put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Nomad Stadium. You can tap this for 1 white. But it deals 1 damage to you, and if you have Threshold, you can tap 1 white and tap this to sacrifice it to gain 4 life. Tarnished Citadel, you can tap this for colorless mana, or you can tap this to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. It deals 3 damage to you. And then War Room, you can tap this for colorless, or you can pay 3 and tap this to pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity to draw a card. And finally we have basic lands. These are all going to be snow-covered plains. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 snow-covered plains. So that is the Darien King of Kjeldor deck tech. So the idea here is to take advantage of his, whenever he's dealt damage, put a 1/1 white soldier creature token into play. We have a lot of weird things in here like Ankh and Jinxed Idol and Jade Statue or Jade Monument. And even Blood of the Martyr to redirect damage or deal damage to us purposely. We even have Pain Lands in a monocolored deck that doesn't necessarily need them, simply so that we can get more value out of the ability. On top of that, we're running pretty much anything in white that says whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life, so that each life that we lose, we're recouping by having a creature enter the battlefield. So it offsets everything so that basically you're net 0 on life loss. So it's an interesting deck tech. I know that this is supposedly a older strategy, but with all the newer cards, it makes this really interesting and fun. There are some considerations to take. I chose to put On Thin Ice in here instead of Honor of the Pure, which is an anthem for white creatures you control. You can also run Karma with Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, because Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth does not have a mana pip in the text box, so it does not count as a black land. You can run it in this deck, turning all of your all lands in play into swamps, and then Karma deals 1 damage to players during their turn equal to the number of swamps they control, which is bad for your opponents, but if you have Darien in play, good for you. So yeah, just some considerations. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. Keep it positive. I will remove negative comments. And yeah, I think that's it. Until next time, guys. Peace.